And so I really want to have us discuss a little bit more about how to be seen as ethical leaders in our role as recovery coaches. And so I have a slideshow, but I am going to spend most of the time having conversation. We'll do a couple of breakouts because, that's how I like to do things around here. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Stacy Charpentier. I am the Director of Training here at CCAR, and I'm hosting this webinar from beautiful downtown Hartford in my office. And I've been at CCAR for about 9.5 years. And I'm not somebody who identifies as a person with lived experience of recovery, but I do have lived experience as a family member. My father struggled with addiction for a great deal of his life before finding recovery. And I feel like that process, along with the process of me working here, has really just ignited a journey of health and wellness. So kind of like a recovery journey, but obviously my own individual pathway and things. And so there are many things as I go through and take these trainings that I have been able to pull and bring into my own practice of living and breathing and all that fun stuff. So welcome. I'm glad that you're here. I will put my information into the chat before I leave. So if you have any questions and want to get in touch, feel free. But let's talk about what we're going to do today. So I'm going to bring us to our first slide. So recovery coaches as ethical leaders. So what I hoped is that we would be able to spend some time thinking about and comparing the role of leader and recovery coach, understand the need for ethical leadership when serving as a recovery coach, and describe the traits and characteristics of ethical leadership to better reflect that in one's practice. So I'm really big about kind of getting a handle on what it is that we're talking about so that we can all have a shared understanding of what we think about leadership and whatnot. So I'm going to create some breakout rooms. And what I want you to do is to go into breakout rooms. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to have a conversation about your thoughts around these two terms, leader and leadership. And so I think it's important to really have a good understanding, or at least a working definition of what your thoughts are in regards to those two things, and maybe chat with some colleagues about that as well. So I'm going to set these up. They will close after 10 minutes. And does anyone have any questions about what I'm asking you to do? All right, I see no questions, and I'm going to open the rooms. Awesome. So I would love to hear from you all about your conversations. So if people can raise their hands, let's get this started. What were your thoughts about leader and leadership? All right, Callie, talk to me.
I think what we kind of talked about as a consensus in our group was a leader is an individual, whereas leadership is like a body, a group of people working together, kind of in harmony. And I like too what Vince had said was like leaders inspire to move like leadership and unity. And like, I kind of really like that. Like, I was just thinking like harmony, easy, and that collective voice to follow the mission and the values and all that.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? What were your conversations like in your breakouts? I need people to be leaders and raise their hands. Yes, Natha.
I just really liked what Ruth said, which was she is a resource, above anything, just being a resource. And I think for me, what also came to mind is people can have the title of leader, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're providing leadership.
Very cool. Thank you. Laura.
Yeah, I was going to say that too, because I was in that same group. I love Ruth talking about that, but I also love what Megan Perry said was about, it's leadership is about creating new leaders. And that's been my experience, certainly. So just wanted to give a shout out to that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I mean, that's one of the things, the parts of our organizational culture here at CCAR is that, we are creating other leaders. And so when I think about that and I kind of look at that as it applies to recovery coaching, we are recovery coaches and we're building other potential recovery coaches, right? We're helping shape somebody's recovery and their recovery journey in hopes that they will go on and possibly coach others, so we're building them and helping them go out there and kind of forge their own path and whatnot. And so I really think that, when you think about recovery coaching as a role and, and what people do, they really are, going out there and showing that leadership. So let's look at a few definitions that I pulled. And I know that some folks talked about this, a great leader inspires confidence in other people and moves them to action, right? And so when you think about it, when we're talking about the recovery coach, we're building up that person's self-efficacy, their self-esteem and everything. And we're giving them the confidence to be able to go forward on that recovery journey. And so when I saw that definition, I was like, well, if that doesn't speak to what a recovery coach does, I'm not really sure what would, and leadership. And this one interested me. So I would love to hear what your thoughts are about this. So leadership is a process of social influence, which maximizes the efforts of others towards the achievement of a goal. So what do y'all think about that one?
I think that's dead on. I mean, what our group talked about a lot was sort of all around this theme of like, it's about others. It's about the concept of servant leadership, the concept of being a resource, the concept of rising tide lifts all boats. We're going to make more leaders. And this orientation toward it's about greater good, or it's about, like there's a mission.
Right.
And if I'm in a leadership position, I am here to serve the mission. So whatever that is, ideally it's for the greater good. It's for the good of others. It's not about me. And so it's, how do I make the most forward movement towards whatever the goal is that we all, the sort of collective has. And I think it still applies very much to coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like when I've been thinking about recovery coaching and leadership as like a parallel kind of thing for a while. I have like a file on my computer where I've like just like tossed stuff that been like, this is, and so when I thought about this and I thought about, how to broach this topic, it wasn't a matter of our recovery coaches leaders, because I think that we already are, but how are we seen as like good ethical leaders? Because I think that's where we need to strive to, is to be seen as ethical leaders, because I still feel like there's people out there that wants to kind of poke holes in what we have going on, and are looking for any excuse to kind of like, say, I told you that wasn't going to work, and so how can we be seen as leaders, but how can we be seen as ethical leaders and people that are trusted to do the job that people are expecting us to do? So thank you for that. And I'm glad that you were able to have some conversations. As I said, we're going to have more conversations and whatnot. I'm going to, me, I like to put people in breakouts. So
wait, hold on. I think.
Oh yeah.
Vince,
Yeah.
Vince, did you unmute yourself? Because you had something on your mind?
Well, I was going to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That one of the things the recovery movement is trying to do is build community. And within those communities, we need leaders. And that's where our coaches can be role models, which is a form of leadership, and build strong leadership for the community that we're building. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And, it's interesting too, like, because I kind of look at it and, we typically, when we think about leaders of the recovery community, we're looking at people like Don Coyes and Bill White and Phil Valentine, although he's not here, so don't tell him I said that. But I'm just saying, like, we typically have like these leaders, but, I feel like we need more, and we need more diversity in that leadership. We need more young people in that leadership. We need more. And so, how do we get people to have the confidence, or how do we get people to be seen as leaders, or how can we build people up to just know that they're a natural born leader, and how can we do that, as well. So I'm always looking to see, like, who are those people that I'm sitting across from today that just says that one thing that's so profound, and know that that person 20 years from now is going to be a new leader in this movement. Like, how do we get to that point? So thank you for that. Community is huge. And I think within the recovery community, like, we're all striving towards that achievement of the greater good, absolutely. So I wanted to bring up the roles, because I've had a lot of, we go through these in the ethical considerations training to kind of think about, where would some of our ethical considerations, kind of rise around these, but which one of these do you see aspects of leadership? So let's have a conversation. I'll do this in the full group. So what are your thoughts about the actual hats that we wear, and where do you see the opportunities and aspects of leadership?
These could be the same roles as the leader.
Thank you. Absolutely.
There's a single one that I'm like, oh no, that wouldn't be leadership.
Karen.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say something similar. I think it's in most of them. I would question whether it's directly in like ally and confidant, or friend and companion, because those imply more of a kind of like horizontal. And we talked about this in our group as well, that leadership doesn't necessarily mean that there's some kind of power imbalance or hierarchy. And in fact, for the best leader, it kind of shouldn't. But certainly I would say that those two kind of roles, less of a leadership kind of role. It's more of an equal, a friend, a companion, whereas the others, I mean, literally you've got leader in the word cheerleader, it's a little bit more obvious, but those are the only two I would say maybe it's not so much of a leadership thing.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else have any other thoughts about that? Yeah, please.
Well, I was just going to say, in those roles that even like friendship or ally confident, if we can role model what that role should look like, then we can be a leader in that role. So whatever role we're doing, we can set an example as to what effective leadership should look like in that role. I don't know.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Nasa.
I think for me, I definitely see it in every role, but within that resource broker and community organizer roles are the two where I definitely see in the UK that there's lacking that leadership of, we talk about the recovery coach sometimes becomes the resource until they find the resource. And sometimes finding that resource is about being a community organizer and bringing those together and supporting them to lead the way there. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's a great point, because I feel like a lot of times too, especially, as you're talking about resources being scarce where you are, we also know that there are areas here where resources are scarce. And so, that recovery coach ends up being some of those things. And when you were talking, it's like, how great, is the opportunity for leadership then to not see a resource and then to figure out the way to bring that resource to light. Like, what do we need then in order to make this happen? You know, how can I, as that recovery coach, knowing this is a deficit in our community, or knowing that this is a need that people are going to have, how do I, you know, where in the community do I need to reach out to? Who are the people I need to go advocate to? Who are those, who do I need to talk to and do that? And so if that isn't, you know, a leader, you know, then again, I don't know what is, you know. And when you think about even the advocacy, you know, and standing up and sharing your story and going out there and, you know, pounding on doors and getting your voices heard and everything else, I mean, you're starting to influence change. And so just by doing some of those things where you may not see it as being leadership, like you are, you know. And so I think, you know, in the same vein, you know, in which of the RC roles do you see aspects of leadership? You know, as I said, we talk about these. There are also aspects where there could be ethical considerations in each of these too. And so what are the pitfalls of, you know, like, where could those things come into play when you look at these roles, the role of leader, and how to be seen as ethical leaders? Are there any pitfalls that people should be aware of, or at least more conscious of, when they're serving in these roles?
I think they're very similar to what we have to watch out for as coaches, right? Because leadership in a way is just coaching, right? You know, good leadership, servant leadership, leadership that treats people like resources and lifts up others and puts, you know, helps them to be in leadership roles and all that. Like, we're still just drawing on the same things to create other leaders, right? Or to help them become or own the term, you know, the title and the role or whatever. So I think it's the same kind of ethical considerations that we have to have. You know, are we doing it for them? Or are we helping them recognize that they can do it for themselves and make choices about doing that?
Right.
You know, like friend and companion, am I treating some people differently because of the, you know, where my boundary line, where my level of intimacy is with people, and is that helping or interfering with their growth as a leader? As a resource broker, am I, you know, providing a menu and you know, saying this might be where you want to go, or am I really drawing out of them you know, their own resourcefulness? I think yeah, I think they're the same. Am I solving problems for people? Because I think a lot of people look to leaders to just solve the problems.
Yeah.
Rather than coming at it from a community organizing, you know, philosophy of that. Okay, we're all going to identify the problem together, because maybe we don't even have the same definition of what the problem is, and then we're going to come together to decide what solutions might be, or how we want to solve solutions. So I think they're very similar.
Yeah, thank you for that. Anyone else have any thoughts? Yes, Jean.
Well, I think that most leaders become leaders because people naturally look to them, just because of how they are in the world. And I think that it becomes an ethical issue when they stop being that naturally and start trying to force it, because they've kind of been elevated up. And so it becomes an ethical issue when people are trying to drag people to their leadership rather than just continuing to be a natural leader.
Thank you. That's a great comment. You know, almost like once you get to a certain point, you might kind of rest on your laurels a bit and just assume, you know, and kind of go into that a little bit of arrogance, you know, for sure. Yeah, Vince.
I keep wanting to talk about coach revision, and I guess what I want to say is the impact of that course and that approach to supervision really impacted my role as leader. You know, to be able to again meet people where they're at and meet the group where they're at, and look at letting them define the direction, help them, you know, become a resource broker to the group. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think also, you know, like, you know, as a supervisor too, trying to let somebody dictate to me, like, what works for each individual person. You know, do they need me to meet with them weekly? Do they need me to meet with them daily? Do they need me to meet with them monthly? You know, and what do those meetings look like? Do we have an agenda? Don't we have an agenda? I mean, every single person is different. And so if I went into that thinking, well, this is when we're all going to meet, this is what we're going to talk about, and this is what, you know, then that's just me, you know, kind of just saying, well, this is the way I run my ship, kind of thing. And you know, as opposed to being that coach, like you said, and just kind of letting them and meeting people where they're at and what they need. And even in the same way of, you know, if we have to come up with a plan, you know, if there are issues and we have, like, what does that plan look like for this individual with their needs and whatnot. So very cool comment. But yeah, I think that, you know, I think when I think about leadership and I think about servant leadership, that's the one that kind of stings the most to me, because at least along these lines, because of the fact it's like, what is the need, and how can I serve in that moment at that time? Like, what is that person needing? And so really kind of letting my style flow with the needs of whatever it is that's going on, rather than me just coming in and, well, I'm the leader, so I'm going to save the day. You know, like, what does the group need now? Maybe they need me to not be around at all, and they need to figure this out for themselves and not have it be about me at all, you know? And so I think that's where a lot of times too, as coaches, like, we have to kind of think about what's our motivation for doing this next thing. Is it because I really want this person to get into this program because, you know, like, what are those motivations, like, that are like, I really need this person to be successful because I want them to be successful? Or is there something about me in there? And that's where the ethical lines, you know, can sometimes get crossed. What is my motivation? And I think that goes back to, when you think about, if we're looking at it for the greater good, like Megan was saying, then we're looking at it for the good of whatever it is, and it has nothing to do with ourselves and the pat on the back we're gonna get, you know, kind of. And you can go into, like, how do people feel motivated? Is it that extrinsic motivation? Do they need to have somebody tell them that they're doing a good job? Do they need money, status, whatever? Or is it intrinsic? And so to me, it's that intrinsic leadership motivation that kind of, at least that's how where I fall on that scale. And so I kind of look at these things like, I want to do things for the greater good, you know, and it has nothing, doesn't matter if my name's not attached to it, doesn't matter, you know, whatever, like, let's figure out how to make this happen. So I think those are very good points. And I think, you know, you're exactly right. Like, when you look at all these things, you know, as leaders, if we're coming in, you know, supervisors, leaders, coaches, if we're coming in with these kind of mindsets, and we kind of stay true to our internal compass of letting that person kind of guide the process and just being there to help them with whatever they need at that moment, then, you know, then at least I feel like we're staying on the right side of that path. But it can be hard, you know, especially as, you know, when we think about putting people or looking at those next levels of who are those leaders, like, you know, you don't want to, like, do too much to, like, build somebody, and then, you know, and then there's, like, this expectation that they need, you know, because maybe they're not ready for that yet. too. So it's kind of like that dance, a little bit of ebb and flow. So I'm going to do breakouts. And I want you to think about these 3 questions, and I can send them into the breakouts as well. So don't worry about memorizing them or anything. I'm going to do breakouts for about 15 minutes this time, because I have 3 kind of big questions here. And I did shake the groups up. I hope I shook them up enough. If we go on the basis that leadership is positively influencing others, how do ethics tie into it? How do our personal actions affect the recovery movement? And what happens when we do not act ethically? So those are some big questions. I'm going to send you into breakout rooms, and again, I'll type those in so that you'll see them if you don't have them. Because I know you're gonna not see the screen, but I'm gonna open up the rooms for 15 minutes. But before I do, does anyone have any questions about what I'm asking you to do? Nope. All right, have some good conversations and we'll talk when you get back. All right, everybody. I see everybody is back. So I would love to hear about your conversations. Talk to me about what you discussed in your breakouts.
In our group, we came up with the visualization of a snowball, and that our community is, snowballing, and our personal actions influence whether that snowballing continues or loses momentum and shrinks. So the need to act ethically, maintain positive personal action, understanding that we're influencing the growth of the snowball. So.
Very cool. I love that. Thank you. Anyone else? What were your conversations like? Yes, Laura.
So we had a great conversation. We talked about the fact that we need to model consistency and constancy, therefore integrity in our lives, not just like in the role of recovery coach or whatever role we may occupy, but across our 24 hours, 365 days. And then also we talked a little bit about the potential ripple effect of even one unethical action to our community, to our recoveries, to our organizations, whoever that might be. Yeah, really, really good conversation.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment?
I would just say real quick, we on the first question, we were like, define ethics and define positively, like sort of,
Right.
which I let, quotation marks, right? Like that's individual, how you determine what is ethical or what is positively influencing. Not always clear.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's kind of like you almost need to have before any conversation about like, what does this term mean, or what does this look like, or what does this feel like, so that everybody's on the same page for sure. So thank you for that. So let's keep going. So I found some of these. Personal ethics are ethical principles that a person uses when making decisions and behaving in both personal and professional settings. These ethics influence various aspects of a person's life and help individuals develop their work ethic, personal and professional goals and values. Individuals use their ethics to determine between right and wrong and influence how someone behaves in challenging situations. Each person's code of ethics varies, but many people share common ethics, such as honesty and respect. What are your thoughts about those comments around personal ethics? Anything feel like doesn't sit right? Does it feel okay? What are your thoughts? I'm going to assume that they're all good and I'm going to move on. So,
I have one thought.
yeah, go ahead, Vince. Yeah, go ahead.
Personal ethics, that slide triggered that when you're considering personal ethics, you now bring in all the cultural and diversity issues that come with you know, personal ethics. You know, since different groups have different core ethics that come from, again, cultural and ethnic backgrounds, that makes it very complicated. It's not that simple to integrate your personal code of ethics with an organization or you know, a recovery community's ethics. So you're always balancing that, and that's got to be challenging.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. That's one thing that when I talk about and when I train our ethical considerations training, you know, I strive to tell people to consider the organization's code of, or the organization's code of ethics that you're working at or that you're looking to work at, because if it doesn't align with your own personal beliefs and values, there's going to be a lot of conflict. You know, there's going to be some times where you might feel like, well, this is wrong, but this is part of it. This is part of how they operate, you know? And so you really do have to kind of think about, you know, where do your personal ethics lie in order to be successful in an organization that doesn't kind of encompass your same beliefs and values. I think that's a really important point to make, because you could be in conflict, well, you know, many times, especially around those challenging situations, you know, for sure. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it. So 6 elements that define ethical leadership: honesty, justice, respect, integrity, responsibility, and transparency. And I think even in the same way we talked about like the recovery coach roles and things, so which of these align with your role as recovery coach and how? What do you think? Yes. Mel, you have your hand up.
Hiya. Yeah. I think honesty for sure, integrity, transparency. And then with justice, I might be taking the wrong meaning of the word justice, but that doesn't seem to me to come into the role of recovery coach unless it's supporting the recovery's desire for justice. And responsibility, well, I think the responsibility is to run the session in the way that we've been trained and to the best of our ability, keeping the recovery as our, you know, at the center of our thoughts and supporting them. So responsibility to stay true to the training and to our ethics, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great thoughts. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Comments, thoughts about that?
I would just offer, in terms of justice, for me, I think treating people justly, you know, with dignity and respect, and giving them, you know, autonomy and self-agency. And then, you know, when I think about the little a advocate and the capital A advocate, I think advocating for more just treatment for people that we work with, people we don't work with, people just people, you know, sort of across the board. I feel like we really model what justice looks like in action, in the way that we interact with people, both recoveries and with all of the other entities and people that we come across in our role. So I think, I feel like there is a connection there. And I think it might be one of my favorite parts of coaching.
Yeah.
I said there's a lot of things. I'm like, that's my favorite part of coaching. Oh, that's my favorite part, because I love so many things.
They're all
about
your
coaching.
favorite part, right? Exactly.
But justice, like we get to fight for people being treated with dignity and people being given resources, you know, in a fair way, and having access to things and all of that. Like I think it is intrinsic to the philosophy of how we treat people.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, the simple definition is just behavior or treatment. And so when we think about respect and dignity and making sure that everybody's given, like when I look at it, that everybody had, and Megan, you and I talk about this, access to equal, or what somebody needs for their own recovery pathway, right? Like equal access to recovery supports. Whatever that person wants, they should have access to. And so I think sometimes when people think of justice, it's more around like justice systems and things such as that. But I think we're looking at it more broadly of, you know, what is just treatment? And that to me means that everybody gets access to what they need to do what they need to do within their recovery pathway. So, you know, so when I looked at these, you know, and I know Phil, you know, often talks about, you know, the right way to do things and with gratitude and everything else. I mean, but beyond gratitude, many of these aligned with, you know, what he constantly refers to is acting right, you know, and these really kind of aligned for me when I saw them. And I thought, well, this is really what we go through. And when you think about the transparency piece, you know, I think we do try to encourage people to be transparent, you know, because then, you know, people can't call you out on how you're treating somebody or if you're doing things, you know, with all of these characteristics and you're also transparent about it, you know. So I know we've been talking a lot about ethics and leadership and everything else. So and we can just put these into the chat, but what are some of the characteristics of a leader outside of the things that we've already mentioned? You know, so if we had to add more characteristics, what would they be? I mean, if people want to talk, they can, but I figured if people wanted to populate the chat as well. Driver, authentic, lead with love. Yes, absolutely. Phil's ears are going to be burning because we've been mentioning him like throughout this whole time. Oh, Megan, you have a pet. You have a cat on your shoulder. Hello. I'm very excited about that. That made my day. Anything else? Characteristics of a leader that we haven't talked about? Trustworthy, yes. Role model. You know, so think about the people that you are driven to follow or that you think are leaders. What if you had to describe them in 3 words, what would those words be? Yes, Natha.
I just think back to some of the leaders I've worked with, and they had the ability to raise people up while acknowledging they did not know everything and showing a willingness to learn.
Thank you. That's huge. Right. And that goes back to, you know, we're constantly trusting people are their own best resource. So I'm not just going to give you information. I'm not just going to make you the recipient or the object of my good advice or whatever it is. I'm going to sit, you know, knee to knee, toe to toe, whatever it is, and have you tell me what makes the most sense to do next for you right now. How can I help you get there? Accountability is huge. Absolutely. Thank you for that. So I have another slide that talks about the traits of an ethical leader. And I want you to talk to me about what do you think about this one. So they know their internal compass and values. They have consistent, we talked about consistency and constancy, ethical behavior. They do not tolerate deviations from the ethical code. They raise their concerns, even if they're unpopular. They admit mistakes and share a recovery plan if needed. They're willing to assume full responsibility. They always show up and speak for those they serve. They act with fairness and they walk the talk. What are your thoughts about these? I see a lot of people kind of nodding. Ah, you are very fortunate.
I was about to say, leadership in a family business versus leadership in an external business. Could we have a slide on that, please? Ms. Carpenter? You know, I'm sure there's another recovery coaching family waiting to hatch somewhere for you.
That's true. I could come up with one, I'm sure. Give me some time.
We had a conversation about a year and a half ago that just because I'm a recovery coach doesn't mean I'm a recovery coach 24/7 in our house with every member of the house.
Well, I mean, that would just, whew. Yeah. And Megan, I agree with you. Some of these are really hard to do all the time, for sure. And I think that's the piece is like, you know, do I have to think about it? Are these unconscious actions? Are these conscious actions? Like, do I have to kind of keep going back? And how do I do that? Like, how do I ensure that I'm doing this? You know, like, how do I remember to do these things? So that's, you know, a really good kind of like, you know, how do I check myself? So that's my question to the group. So if these are the traits, like, how do we check ourselves? How do we know that we're doing this?
I was going to ask you a question about that, Stacey, because at the beginning, at the beginning you said, you know, sometimes we have to stay resilient when people are picking holes in what we do because you're a parent. So how do you stay resilient? And when you maybe make a decision or do something that you go, oh, that wasn't quite right, I need to own up to it, or in a big circle like you're in, you know, how do you do that and stay resilient and keep going and be heart-centered and all that other good stuff that we talk about when you either make a mistake or people are picking holes in what you do?
Yeah, I think for me, and that's a great question, you know, because I think for me, I feel every decision, I feel everything that I do, you know, and so I know kind of, if not in that moment, within a half hour to an hour, or I can't sleep that night, like I know if something like just doesn't feel right, and I don't know what to call it. I don't know what it is. But I just know it. It's like, is it a gut thing? Is it it's weighing on me? Like I should have reacted differently to that. And then is it something that like, it's internal, like, why am I not able to manage my stuff around this? Is this work that I personally have to do? Or is there something that I owe somebody an apology for? Or do I need to say, hey, wait, you know I jumped to this conclusion, but after I've sat with it, I need to do this, you know? So, you know, I don't know if like I can pinpoint and speak to the exact feeling that it is, but I just know when something is wrong, it feels wrong. And for me, like I have to own up to it. I also, you know, as somebody who works for an agency where we are seen as leaders, and I am seen as a leader, even though I don't often see that of myself, you know, I always try to, you know, I try to filter things that I say, that I post, that you know, if I post this on social media, you know, what would Phil say if I posted this on social media? In the same way I would say, what would my mom say if I posted this on social media? So, I mean, there's that constant like filtering and just kind of looking at, you know, is this the right battle to get into? Is this the right time to have a conversation, so I'm constantly wrestling and I'm constantly getting coached, like I don't think anybody does this alone. And so, if I'm feeling a certain kind of way, who are the people that I go to say, I'm feeling a certain kind of way about this, talk me through it so that I can understand what I'm feeling or why I'm feeling a certain way about it. But I think what I do and what somebody else does is going to be completely unique, but I definitely do know that if there's something that feels wrong, I feel it. And then like I physically feel it. And so I have to do something about it.
I would, excuse me, piggyback on that and to answer Nathan's question. I think on this list, you should add, they prioritize self-care. Because, I mean, what you were talking about is paying attention to yourself, but we cannot be ethical leaders if we're not practicing self-care.
Yeah, for sure.
You're going to stress out, you're going to end up acting out, and it needs to be a high priority on everyone's list is self-care.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's for sure. And I think that's, again, that goes back to you can be at your best self when you are your best self, right? Like when you are able to take that time to kind of just breathe and whatnot. So I agree with you, Vince. I might react to something a certain way, which is why I might need to take a pause and think about it. Like, is it an internal thing? Is it me? Is it that I'm just cranky today? Is it that and kind of reassess all of that before I come forward. So thank you for that. I will add that as a matter of fact. Yes, Laura, comment.
Yes, I mean, you kind of just said what I was going to talk about, and that is making sure that I have an internal check. So, like the first bullet point here, know my internal compass and my values, but making sure for me on a daily basis, every night I do like a check of my day, a daily review or whatever you want to call it. And if there's something that maybe I didn't give space and time for it to rise up, or it didn't just rise up in the moment, then that often comes in at that time. And thankfully, intuition holds things until we have the presence of mind to become aware of it. And so then I can ask myself, a series of questions. And those questions may be, do I need to do something about this? Do I need to make amends or make an apology to somebody? Do I need to have a meeting with somebody about it? Do I need to talk to my coach about it? And I think this is so great to point to the fact that what I feel is absolutely true is that all coaches need coaches. And just that's an act of self-care, a practice of self-care for me too.
Yeah, thank you for that. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think everybody needs somebody or a group of people or, that they can just have those gut check moments with, that we just, am I on the right track? Am I spending too much time on this? Am I, because oftentimes if I don't get it out, it's going to sit in here or it's going to sit in here, and then, and I'm not going to be able to move on or make the best decision because I'm wrestling with it or I'm conflicted. So absolutely. And there are definitely times where you have to kind of sit and think, like, is it a me thing? Like where am I holding it? Yeah, Ruth.
Thanks, Stacey, and absolutely delighted to be here this afternoon. It's a great afternoon, some great conversations, some great ideas. Thank you. There's one piece that, sort of I try to remember, especially when I'm in ethics trainings. Sort of we all fuck up from time to time.
Yes.
It's the price of admission. And the good news is that the words "I'm sorry" have been invented. we can take responsibility for what we get wrong. We can own it. We can make amends. We can course correct. We can make whatever reparations are required. We can, sort of fix it, whatever it is. Now, I don't present this as a way of thinking, oh, well, it doesn't matter because there's always an out. That's not my purpose here. What I just want us to remember is that to err is human. And and we have options for further action after we make a mistake. And that's part of our self-care too, to remember that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And I feel that's, a lot of times it's not what we do when things are going well, it's what we do when things are going wrong that truly define us and help us kind of understand, and just know, like, those are where we're challenged, and how we meet those challenges, or how we, get through those challenges are really, and when you think about, that's what builds coaches, it's those life experiences that have built and given coaches, that kind of confidence to be like, if I can get through this, I know that person can get through it too. I believe that they can. I believe that there's a better way out there for people to be able to find recovery, or this or that. Like, that's part of that social justice that just kind of drives people. But yeah, I believe, like, there's no way that any of us are perfect. And I think, as much as we might try to be always ethical, like, you're right, there's going to be some things that we're going to have a misstep, or we're going to do wrong. And I think it's in those moments of wrong that we kind of can better define, like, how do we come out of those, and how do we, become better, or use those as teachable moments to be able to do better. So thank you, Ruth. I so appreciate that, because I do think a lot of times, as I said, people are waiting for us to do wrong things. People are waiting for us to not succeed, but at the same time, those things are going to happen. It's what we do in spite of those things. And when those things happen, that I think really shows our true character as coaches and as leaders, and as ethical leaders at that. Any other comments, questions? We're about 20 after 2. I did have a scenario, but I'm not going to put you into breakouts because we only have 10 minutes. So I don't want to do that, but I just want to bring this up because I think, this kind of speaks to some of the things where coaches are kind of, and coaches kind of get torn between some stuff. So your organization is funded through a grant where 8 recovery coaches provide services at a local hospital. And due to the success of that program, a local sober home would like to contract with your organization to provide recovery coaching services to its residents. They have 20 residents and would like to contract with your organization, sorry, there's a typo, with you to have each resident meet with a coach once a week. Given the 6 elements of ethical leadership, honesty, justice, respect, integrity, responsibility, transparency, what are your considerations? So would you be able to take this on, and how would you take that on? So what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are to bring this to both your organization and to the sober home in terms of defining further what this means for all those involved. I mean, as an ethical leader, I would try to define what they're asking, and and to make sure we are able to be responsible in meeting that and not compromising the organization.
Yeah, because there's a lot, there's a lot within that. If the grant is paying my 8 coaches to do work at a local hospital, but I have the opportunity to contract outside of that, do we have the capacity? If they're getting paid through a grant, am I able to use them outside of that service? Yes, Simon.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's all right.
It was just to go off what you were already kind of going there, I think, in what you were saying, that your grant is towards the funding for the hospital. So to be upfront and honest about that, that's what this money is for. But to maybe work with the home on maybe looking at gaining more funding to see if you can employ more recovery coaches to expand your organisation, but also work closely with them. So you're ethically looking after the funding and the contract you've got with the hospital, but you're also being transparent with them in how can we get more funding for us to be able to support you in putting some recovery people in there with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Jean.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like I would need more information. A lot of times people see success in what we do, and then have expectations for what we need to do for them. And so understanding what their expectations are and if those actually align with what we do as recovery coaches. And sometimes that's just a matter of being transparent about what we do, and people are willing to, give it a try. But oftentimes I see it that people come in and have an expectation of what we do and then want us to fill that rather than just let us be recovery coaches.
Yeah, very, very good statement. Yeah, we get this a lot of times as people, oh, you do that in the hospital, so come and do this here or come and do that there, and have a completely different sense of what they think recovery coaching is. They see the success, but they may not understand the role or the scope or, what it is that we do and how we do it. And so they just want to kind of replicate it without really giving much thought into what goes into that. And what it is that they want us to do with those residents, for that hour a week and whatnot. So any other comments, thoughts? Yes, Natha.
That conversation there, Jean, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think for us here, what we've seen, the past 9 days, I think there have been, Khalees can say, just over 20 jobs listed, which have the title recovery coach. But Khalees actually found the same job descriptions from a year and a half ago, and now the job title has just been changed. So that real transparency about what we do and what your expectations are has just got to happen here, because people just want recovery coaches who are then going to be support worker, navigators, chauffeurs, benefit drivers. And so that's just, it's just constantly on my mind. The words others use may not have the same definition to me, so we have to get really clear on those definitions here.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think we see that a lot. Like right now, people are trying to jump on the recovery coach bandwagon because they see that it's working, it's successful, that coaches are doing amazing work. But are they truly coaching? Are they truly doing the scope of the role as it's been designed? Or I think, Ruth, you used the term chauffeurs and gophers, right? Like, what is that? What are they actually being tasked with doing? Because I think, especially right now, there's a lot of money out there for people that, are going to put, there's grants and a bunch of money out there to try to put some of these programs together. But are they being put together with the spirit of what the recovery coach is meant to do? Which could be detrimental for the entire profession. If people are out there wearing that role, but they're not doing the scope of the role, that could also be damaging to the profession as well. Any other comments, questions? We have just a few minutes left. I want to honor the time and make sure that we get out at 2:30, but I do want to ask if anybody has any comments or questions. As I said, I would put my information in the chat box, although I know many of you know how to reach me, but feel free if there's anything outside of this session that you would like to talk about. I'm always more than willing and able. So anything else as we close our session today? Anything that you feel you want more of? I know Michael is here with me as well, part of the training team. So if there's anything that you would like us to tackle, any topics that you would like us to tackle on these webinars, we would certainly love to hear from you.
Definitely.
Yeah, Cleve.
I just have a question while I have y'all here. Based on that conversation we just had about ensuring the role of a recovery coach is that role that it was designed for, do you have any advice on that, Stacey and Michael and y'all, to ensure that that's, yeah.
I think that's part of our education and advocacy hat, is to just keep talking about what the role is, getting out there and sharing what the role is, what we do. And, if we see something, challenge it. If you see a role that doesn't fit, challenge it. There are people that go through our trainings and then they go for a job and they'll be like, no, I'm not supposed to do, this isn't what I was told a recovery coach is, and a lot of times, that agency will just be like, all right, well, obviously this isn't a good fit. But I think the more people that challenge those, this isn't what it says in the job description, or, whatever, the better we can do. But it's hard, because I always look at people who want to be paid doing this work are going to take a recovery coach role, even if it may not be the true scope of it, because they want to work, and that's where I feel like, we're really taking advantage of a population of people that are just out there trying to do the work that they've been trained to do, that they want to do, that their lived experience is driving them to do. But they're not allowed to do the full scope, but they're going to take that job anyway, because, there's not many options out there. So I think it's up to us to be that big A advocate wherever we can, and challenge it wherever we see it. Anybody else? That was a great question. And again, like I said, I left my information in the chat. If you all think of anything that you want us to cover on future webinars, let either myself or Michael know. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that you enjoyed it. And I know I enjoyed being able to be with you all today. And have a good rest of your day. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.
Take care, everybody.